The Valori Empire had ruled the stars for 300 years. They had conquered 17 star systems and destroyed any species that dared to stand against them. Their warships were massive and black, built to strike fear into the hearts of anyone who saw them. Their soldiers were tall and gray-skinned, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed red in the darkness. They believed they were the greatest power in the galaxy, and for 3 centuries, no one had proven them wrong. Admiral Catherine stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and looked at the small blue planet on the view screen. It was a pretty world, covered in water and green land. His scouts had discovered it 2 weeks ago on the outer edge of the Orion Spur, far from the center of galactic civilization. The species that lived there called themselves humans. Catherine had read the reports about these humans. They were soft creatures with only 2 arms and fragile bodies. They spent most of their time fighting among themselves over small pieces of their planet. They had only recently developed space travel and had not even left their own star system. They were primitive. They were weak. They would be easy to conquer. He turned to his communications officer. "Send a standard message," he said. "Give them 72 hours to surrender. Tell them that if they refuse, we will burn their world to ash." The message was sent across all frequencies. It reached every government on Earth within minutes. It showed the massive fleet of 3,000 Valori warships holding position just beyond the 4th planet, the one the humans called Mars. It showed recordings of other worlds the Valori had conquered, cities burning and populations screaming. It made the terms very clear. Surrender or die. In Geneva, Switzerland, the United Earth Defense Council gathered in emergency session. Leaders from every nation sat around a massive table, their faces pale with fear. They had always known that other life existed in the universe. They had prepared for this moment for decades. But now that it was here, many of them wanted to give up. Admiral Nathan Cole walked into the room and every voice went silent. Cole was 63 years old, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had spent his entire life in the military, rising through the ranks until he became the commander of all Earth's defense forces. He had trained for alien invasion scenarios since he was a young officer. He had built humanity's secret fleet. He had planned for this exact day. He stood at the head of the table and looked at the assembled leaders. "I have seen the message," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "I have analyzed their fleet. I know what they want." The president of the European Federation leaned forward. "Can we fight them?" she asked. "Can we win?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I do not know if we can win, but I know that we cannot surrender." "Why not?" demanded the Prime Minister of Japan. "If we surrender, at least some of our people might survive. If we fight, they will kill everyone." Cole shook his head. "You have not read the full intelligence reports. The Valori do not take slaves. They do not accept surrender in any meaningful way. When they conquer a world, they take everything of value and then they sterilize the planet. Every species that has surrendered to them has been wiped out within a generation. There is no survival in submission. There is only delayed extinction." The room was silent. The leaders looked at each other with growing horror as they understood what Cole was telling them. "So we fight," said the President of the United States. "Even if we lose, we fight." "Yes," said Cole. "We fight. And we make them pay for every inch of space they take. We make them bleed so badly that even if they destroy us, they will never forget what it cost them. We show the rest of the galaxy that humans do not go quietly into the night." The vote was unanimous. Earth would resist. Cole walked to the communications center deep beneath the building. His senior staff was already there, waiting for him. Captain Henry Shaw was a young officer with brown hair and sharp eyes. He commanded the carrier strike group that would lead the first wave of attacks. Commander Katie Price was in charge of the planetary defense grid, a network of weapons satellites and ground-based missile systems that circled the Earth. Dr. Maria Santos was the head of xenobiology, and she had been studying everything they knew about the Valori since the first contact. What do we know about them? Cole asked. Dr. Santos pulled up data on the main screen. They are physically stronger than us, and their technology is more advanced. Their ships have powerful shields that can absorb most of our conventional weapons. Their tactics are rigid and disciplined, perfected over centuries of conquest. Weaknesses? Cole asked. Their shields operate on predictable frequencies. If we can find the right modulation, we might be able to punch through. Also, they have never faced a serious challenge. Every species they have encountered either surrendered immediately or was too primitive to put up a real fight. They are not used to enemies who fight back with intelligence and determination. Cole nodded slowly. So they are overconfident. Very much so, Santos agreed. Admiral Catherine gave us 72 hours. He could have attacked immediately, but he wanted to give us time to despair. He wanted to break our will before the fighting even started. That tells me he does not truly understand what we are. Cole turned to his other officers. Shaw, I want every ship we have ready to launch within 48 hours. Pull ships from the asteroid mining operations, the lunar bases, everywhere. If it can fly and hold a weapon, I want it in the fight. Yes, sir, Shaw said. Price, activate the defense grid. Full power to all systems. I want Earth wrapped in so much firepower that anything that gets close will wish it had stayed home. Understood, Admiral, Price replied. Cole looked at the screen showing the Valori fleet. 3,000 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. By every measure, Earth was outmatched. By every calculation, they should lose. But Cole had learned something in his 40 years of military service. Wars were not won by calculations. They were won by the soldiers who refused to accept defeat. They were won by the people who kept fighting when all hope seemed lost. They were won by sheer, stubborn, human determination. He picked up the communication device and connected to the Valori flagship. Admiral Catherine's Ervigus Curris appeared on the screen, his red eyes glowing with amusement. Have you come to surrender, human? Catherine asked. Cole stared at him without blinking. I have come to give you our answer. And what is your answer? Cole spoke one word, clear and strong, so that every being in the Valori fleet could hear it. No, Catherine laughed. It was a harsh sound, like metal scraping against stone. You are brave, little human. Foolish, but brave. Very well. In 72 hours, I will burn your world. And I will make sure you live long enough to watch everyone you love die. The screen went dark. Cole turned to his officers. Their faces were grim but determined. They knew what was coming. They knew they might all die. But none of them looked away. Ladies and gentlemen, Cole said quietly, let us show these aliens what happens when you threaten Earth. The clock started counting down. 72 hours until the end of everything, or the beginning of something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity was going to war. The news spread across Earth in minutes. Every television, every radio, every phone showed the same message. Aliens were coming. They wanted to destroy humanity. There was no escape. There was no surrender. The only choice was to fight. Admiral Catherine watched the planet from his flagship and waited for the panic to begin. He had seen this happen before on dozens of worlds. The population would turn on each other. Governments would collapse. Riots would tear through cities. By the time his fleet attacked, the humans would already be half destroyed by their own fear. But something strange happened instead. On Earth, old enemies stopped fighting. Countries that had been rivals for generations suddenly put aside their differences. Soldiers who had been pointing guns at each other across borders turned around and began working together. Within hours, the entire planet was united in a way it had never been before. In Moscow, factories that had been making cars switched to making missiles. In Beijing, engineers worked through the night to modify civilian aircraft into bombers. In Sao Paulo, shipyards that had been building cargo vessels began welding armor plates and weapon systems onto their hulls. Every resource on the planet was redirected toward one single goal: survival. Commander Katie Price sat in her control center beneath the Rocky Mountains and watched the data flowing across her screens. She had expected chaos. She had expected fear. Instead, she saw something that made her heart swell with pride. Millions of people were volunteering to fight. They came from every country, every background, every walk of life. Farmers and teachers, doctors and artists, young people and old. They showed up at recruitment centers with fire in their eyes and said the same thing. "Tell me what to do." Price connected to Admiral Cole. "Sir, you need to see these numbers. We have more volunteers than we can process. People are literally lining up around the block." Cole looked at the data and nodded slowly. "The Valori do not understand us," he said. "They think that because we fight among ourselves, we are weak. They do not realize that we fight because we care so much. When something threatens all of us, we become something else entirely." On the lunar base, Captain Henry Shaw gathered his pilots for a briefing. They were a mixed group, men and women from a dozen different countries. Some were veterans with years of experience. Others were young recruits who had never seen real combat. But they all had the same look in their eyes. "The Valori have bigger ships," Shaw said. "They have better shields. They have weapons we do not fully understand. By every measurement, we should lose this fight." He paused and looked at each of them in turn. "But they have never fought humans before. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know that we have been fighting each other for thousands of years. They do not know that we have turned war into an art form. They think they are the predators and we are the prey. We are going to show them how wrong they are." A young pilot named Danny Martinez raised his hand. "Sir, what if we cannot win? What if they are just too strong?" Shaw smiled grimly. "Then we make sure they remember us. We make sure that for the next 1,000 years, every species in the galaxy knows what happened when the Valori tried to take Earth. We become a legend. We become a warning." Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, something unexpected was happening. The mining ships that worked there were not military vessels. They were crewed by civilians, ordinary men and women who had come to space looking for work and adventure. When they heard about the invasion, most people expected them to run. Instead, they started fighting. Frank Morrison was a 58-year-old engineer who had spent the last 20 years working on asteroid mining ships. His daughter Lisa worked alongside him as a systems technician. When the news came, Frank called a meeting of every mining crew in the belt. "We have two choices," he said. "We can run for the outer planets and hope the aliens do not follow. Or we can take these ships and turn them into weapons." His daughter stepped forward. "Our ships are not fighters," she said, "but they are tough. They are built to survive impacts from asteroids. And we know this part of space better than anyone. If we modify our mining lasers to increase their power, we might be able to hurt those alien ships." The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the mining fleet became an irregular fighting force. They welded extra armor to their hulls. They overloaded their lasers to create improvised weapons. They turned their ore carriers into ramming ships loaded with explosives. On the Valori flagship, Sub-Commander Velonis studied the reports coming in from his intelligence officers. His four eyes narrowed as he read the data. "Admiral, he said to Kethran. "The humans are not behaving as expected." Kethran waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "They are panicking. It is to be expected." "No, sir. That is the problem. They are not panicking. They are organizing. Their entire planet has united within a single day. Their factories are producing weapons at an incredible rate. Their population is volunteering to fight in numbers we have never seen before." Kethran turned to look at his subordinate. "So they wish to die fighting. That changes nothing. We have conquered species that resisted before." Velinus shook his head slowly. "With respect, Admiral, I do not think we have. The Thargan Collective resisted for 3 months before they fell. The Kethris Coalition lasted 6 weeks. But both of those species showed fear. Their resistance was driven by desperation." He pulled up the intercepted human communications on the main screen. "These transmissions are different. Listen to them. There is no despair. There is no pleading. There is something else. Something our translation software cannot properly interpret." Kethran listened. The human voices were calm, determined, even excited. They spoke of the coming battle not as a tragedy, but as a challenge. They made jokes about death. They laughed in the face of destruction. They seemed almost eager for the fight to begin. "What is that emotion?" Kethran asked. "What are they feeling?" Velinus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said a word that the Valerie had never had reason to use before: anticipation. On Earth, Dr. Maria Santos worked through the night in her laboratory. She had captured fragments of Valori shield technology from a probe that had been destroyed in the outer system years ago. Now she was trying to find a weakness that humanity could exploit. Her assistant, a young man named Eric Grant, brought her another cup of coffee. "Any progress?" he asked. Santos rubbed her tired eyes. "The shields are impressive. They absorb energy across a wide spectrum. But there are gaps. Tiny fluctuations in the shield frequencies that occur at regular intervals. If we can time our attacks to hit those gaps, we might be able to punch through." "How do we time something like that in the middle of a battle?" Santos smiled. "We build it into our weapons. Smart missiles that can detect the fluctuations and adjust their timing automatically. It will take time to develop, but I think we can do it." In the control center, Admiral Cole received reports from across the planet. Production was ahead of schedule. The defense grid was fully operational. The volunteer forces were being trained and equipped. Everything was coming together faster than anyone had expected. Commander Price appeared on his screen. "Admiral, we have a problem. The civilian ships from the asteroid belt want to fight. They are not trained. They are not equipped. They are going to get themselves killed." Cole thought about this for a moment. Then he said, "Let them come." "Sir?" "Those people know that they are not soldiers. They know that their ships are not warships. They are coming anyway. That kind of courage cannot be taught. It cannot be ordered. It can only be inspired." He paused. "Find places for them in our formation. Use them as scouts, as harassment forces, as decoys. They may not survive, but they will make a difference." Price nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I understand." The clock counted down. 60 hours remained. Then 50. Then 40. The Valori fleet began to move toward Earth. On every continent, in every city, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. They knew what was coming. They knew that many of them would die. But instead of running, they squared their shoulders and prepared to face whatever came next, because that was what humans did. They fought. The Valori fleet entered weapons range on a Tuesday morning. The sun was just rising over the Pacific Ocean when the first alien ships crossed the defensive perimeter that Commander Katie Price had established around Earth. 3,000 warships. each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, formed a wall of black metal that blocked out the stars. Admiral Catherine stood on his bridge and looked at the tiny blue planet before him. This would be easy. This would be quick. By nightfall, the humans would be nothing more than ash and memory. "Begin the attack," he ordered. The Valori ships opened fire. Beams of green energy lanced through space toward Earth. The first volley was meant to destroy the orbital defense platforms, the satellites and stations that formed the outer ring of human defenses, but the platforms were not there. Catherine stared at his sensors in confusion. "Where are they?" Our scouts reported defensive installations at these coordinates. Before anyone could answer, the void of space around his fleet erupted with explosions. The humans had moved their platforms. They had hidden them behind asteroids, behind the moon, behind anything that could provide cover. Now those platforms opened fire from every direction at once. Missiles streaked through the darkness. Laser beams cut across the battlefield. Kinetic rounds, simple chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds, slammed into Valori shields. At the same moment, the human fleet attacked. Captain Henry Shaw led the first wave from his carrier, a massive ship called the Defiance. Behind him came 100 fighters, small and fast and deadly. They dove into the Valori formation like wolves attacking a herd of cattle. "Target their engines," Shaw commanded over the radio. "Ignore their weapons. If we can slow them down, we can take them apart piece by piece." His pilots followed orders. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. They knew that many of them would not survive. They did not care. All that mattered was making every shot count. The Valori fought back with overwhelming firepower. Their weapons were powerful enough to destroy a human ship with a single hit. But the human ships were fast and small and hard to target. They danced through the energy beams like leaves in a storm. Danny Martinez, the young pilot who had asked about losing, destroyed 3 Valori fighters in the first 10 minutes of battle. His hands were steady on his controls. His voice was calm as he called out targets. When an enemy beam clipped his wing and sent him spinning, he regained control and went right back to fighting. "Got a problem here," he said over the radio. "Lost my left wing." "Still flying, though." "Return to the carrier," Shaw ordered. "Negative, sir. I can still fight, and I am not done yet." On the ground, Commander Price coordinated the battle from her bunker. Thousands of data streams flowed across her screens, showing her the position of every ship, every missile, every beam of energy in the fight. She directed the defense grid like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Platform 7, shift fire to Sector 9, she commanded. "Carrier Group 3, pull back and regroup. "Asteroid Myers, I need a distraction on the enemy's left flank." The battle raged for hours. The humans lost ships by the dozen. Every death hurt. Every explosion meant someone's son or daughter, mother or father, was gone forever. But for every human ship that died, they took Valori vessels with them. Admiral Catherine could not understand what was happening. His fleet was the most powerful force in the galaxy. They had crushed species that were far more advanced than these humans. Yet these primitives were making them bleed. How is this possible? He demanded. They are outnumbered and outgunned. Why are they not breaking? Sub-Commander Velanus checked his tactical display. They are adapting faster than we anticipated. Every time we find a weakness in their formation, they adjust. They are learning our tactics in real time. That is impossible. It takes years to develop proper battle strategies. And yet they are doing it in minutes. The mining ships from the asteroid belt arrived at the battle halfway through the first day. They were not pretty. They were not graceful. They were ugly. Vessels covered in welded armor plates and improvised weapons. But they hit the Valori fleet like a hammer. Frank Morrison piloted his old cargo hauler straight into the center of the enemy formation. His daughter Lisa worked the weapon systems, firing their modified mining laser at anything that moved. They were not trained soldiers. They did not know proper military tactics, but they knew how to work together, and they knew how to survive in the most dangerous environment in the solar system. There, Lisa shouted, pointing at a Valerie cruiser whose shields were flickering. Hit it now. Frank turned the ship and pushed the engines to maximum. Their laser cut through the weakened shields and struck the enemy ship's engine core. The cruiser exploded in a ball of fire. Got one, Lisa cheered. Keep fighting, her father replied. We are not done yet. Not all the mining ships survived. A vessel called the Lucky Strike, piloted by a man named Tony Blake, was hit by multiple Valori beams. His ship was crippled, drifting, about to explode. But instead of trying to escape, Blake turned his dying ship toward the nearest Valori dreadnought. He opened the communication channel. His final words were transmitted across the entire battlefield. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my kids I'm sorry I will not be there to see them grow up. And tell these alien bastards that Tony Blake says goodbye. He rammed his ship into the dreadnought at full speed. The explosion took out both vessels. Admiral Cole watched from Earth as his people fought and died. He had seen many battles in his career. He had lost soldiers before, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting with a fury that seemed almost supernatural. Every time a ship was destroyed, two more took its place. Volunteers flew missions that should have been impossible. Pilots who had been hit continued fighting until their ships literally fell apart around them. Ground crews worked without sleep to repair damaged vessels and send them back into battle. By the end of the first day, the Valori had lost 800 ships. By the end of the second day, they had lost over 1,000. By the end of the week, half of their fleet was gone. Admiral Catherine stood on his bridge surrounded by the wreckage of his ambitions. The flagship Eternal Conquest was damaged. His officers were terrified. His soldiers were beginning to question whether victory was even possible. We must retreat, Valenus said quietly. If we continue this fight, we will lose everything. Retreat? Catherine snarled. The Valori Empire does not retreat. We have never retreated in 300 years. Then we will die here, all of us. Is your pride worth the lives of every soldier in this fleet? Catherine looked at the battle still raging outside his window. Human ships were everywhere now, swarming his remaining vessels like angry insects. They did not stop. They did not negotiate. They did not show any mercy at all. For the first time in his life, Admiral Catherine felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Order all ships to fall back, he said quietly. We will regroup beyond the outer planets. The retreat order went out across the Valori fleet. The surviving ships broke formation and fled toward deep space. The humans pursued them, continuing to attack until the last enemy vessel had jumped away. On Earth, people watched the news in stunned silence. They had won. They had actually won. The greatest military power in the galaxy had come to destroy them, and they had sent it running. Admiral Cole stood in his command center and looked at the celebration beginning around him. He did not smile. He knew that this was not the end. The Valori would be back. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination. But when they came, humanity would be ready, because now they knew something the rest of the galaxy had never learned. Humans do not know how to give up. The Valori expected humans to do what every other species had done after winning a defensive battle. They expected them to fortify their system, build walls around their world, and count themselves lucky to be alive. For 3 centuries, every species that had survived an encounter with the Empire had chosen the same path. Hide and pray that the Valori would find easier targets elsewhere. The humans had different plans. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Nathan Cole stood before the United Earth Council in Geneva. The chamber was packed with leaders from every nation, all of them still shocked by their victory and uncertain about what came next. Cole walked to the podium and looked at their faces. He saw hope. He saw fear. He saw a question that no one wanted to ask out loud. What now? Ladies and gentlemen, Cole began, we have won a great victory, but we have not won the war. The Valari retreated to their space. They are rebuilding their fleet. They are preparing to return. And when they come back, they will bring everything they have. He paused to let his words sink in. We have two choices. We can wait here and let them attack again. We can hope that our defenses will hold a second time. Or we can do something that no species has ever done before. We can take the fight to them. We can hunt them across the stars and end this threat forever. The chamber erupted in debate. Some leaders argued that such a plan was madness. They had barely survived one battle. How could they hope to attack an empire that controlled 17 star systems? Others pointed out that staying on the defensive was also dangerous. The Valari had unlimited resources. Humanity had only one planet. A war of attrition would end in extinction. The vote took 3 days. When it was finished, the result was unanimous. Humanity would go on the offensive. Dr. Maria Santos led the team that would make it possible. Using technology salvaged from destroyed Valori ships, combined with human innovation and creativity, she developed a faster-than-light drive within 6 months. It was not elegant. It was not efficient. But it worked. The Valori use what we are calling jump gates, she explained to the military leadership. Fixed installations that allow ships to travel instantly between systems. Our drives are different. They are slower, but they are also portable. We can go anywhere we want, not just where their gates allow. Lisa Morrison, the engineer's daughter, who had fought in the asteroid belt battle, designed a new class of warship based on what they had learned. She called them the Fury class. They were fast, heavily armed, and built to fight in Valori space, using Valori technology against them. The first ship of the line was named the Thunderbolt, and it rolled off the assembly line less than a year after the invasion. Commander Katie Price was promoted to Admiral and given command of the 1st Expeditionary Fleet. She had spent her entire career defending Earth. Now she would lead the attack that would carry humanity to the stars. Her fleet consisted of 50 warships, each one crewed by volunteers who knew they might never come home. Among them was Captain Henry Shaw, now commander of the Defiance, and Danny Martinez, who had survived the first battle despite losing half a ship. The fleet launched from Earth orbit on a cold January morning. Millions of people gathered to watch, standing in parks and on rooftops, cheering as the ships accelerated toward the edge of the solar system. It was the first time in history that humans were leaving their home system, not as explorers or traders, but as warriors. Admiral Price stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Liberty, and watched Earth grow smaller behind them. She felt a weight settle on her shoulders, the weight of responsibility for every soul under her command. But she also felt something else: excitement, anticipation, a hunger for justice that had been building since the day the Valori first threatened her world. Set course for the Varak system, she ordered. That is their nearest supply depot. We are going to make them understand that Earth is no longer just a target. It is a threat. The attack on Verax took the Valori completely by surprise. They had never imagined that humans could travel between stars without using the jump gates. When Price's fleet appeared in their system, their commanders did not know how to respond. They had no protocols for dealing with an enemy that attacked from the void. The battle lasted 3 hours. The human ships cut through the Valori defenses like a blade through paper. They destroyed supply stations, manufacturing facilities, and a dozen warships. Then they disappeared back into deep space before reinforcements could arrive. Over the next 2 years, the pattern repeated across Valori territory. Human fleets struck without warning, hitting targets and vanishing before the enemy could respond. They attacked mining operations and communication relays. They destroyed fuel depots and shipyards. They turned the Valori's own tactics against them, using fear and uncertainty as weapons. But Admiral Price had another goal beyond simple destruction. She was searching for something that the Valori had kept hidden for centuries: the enslaved species. Not every world the Empire had conquered had been destroyed. Some populations had been kept alive to serve as workers, building ships and weapons for their masters. These species had lived under Valori rule for generations, their spirits broken. Their hope extinguished until the humans came. The first liberation was a planet called Kethaner Prime. It was a factory world, home to a species of small, six-limbed creatures who had been forced to build Valori warships for 200 years. When Price's fleet arrived, the Valori garrison assumed it was just another raid. They were wrong. This time, the humans did not retreat. They landed ground forces, fought through the factories and barracks, and freed the workers. When the Kethaner realized what was happening, they did not understand at first. No one had ever fought for them. No one had ever treated them as anything other than property. Admiral Price personally walked through the liberated factories, speaking to the former slaves through translation devices. One old Kethaner, his body bent from centuries of work, approached her with tears streaming down his face. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you risk your lives for us? You do not know us. We cannot pay you. We have nothing to offer." Price knelt down so she was at eye level with him. "We did not come here for payment. We came here because what the Valori did to you was wrong. Because no species should be forced to live in chains. Because that is what humans do. We fight for people who cannot fight for themselves." The old Kethaner stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that his species had not done in 200 years. He smiled. Word of the liberation spread across the galaxy. Other enslaved species heard the stories and began to hope. Underground resistance movements that had been dormant for generations started to organize. A coalition began to form, united not by politics or resources, but by a single idea: freedom. Admiral Catherine received reports of these developments from his headquarters on the Valori homeworld. Each report was worse than the last. Supply lines were being cut. Conquered species were revolting. His empire was beginning to crack. He called an emergency meeting of the Imperial War Council. The room was filled with the highest-ranking officers in the Valori military, all of them concerned about the growing threat. "We must destroy the human homeworld," one general demanded. "Send every ship we have. Burn their planet to ash and end this rebellion before it spreads further." "We tried that already," Kethran replied coldly. "We sent 3,000 ships. Fewer than 1,500 returned. Do you suggest we weaken our core defenses even further? Then what do we do?" Another officer asked. "These humans are everywhere. We cannot predict where they will strike next. They move through space in ways we do not understand. How do we fight an enemy we cannot find?" Catherine had no answer. For the first time in 300 years, the Valori Empire was on the defensive and somewhere out in the darkness of space. Admiral Katie Price was already planning her next move. "Set course for the Vethkar system," she told her navigation officer. "It is time to pay the Valori another visit." The hunt continued. 3 years after first contact, human fleets surrounded the Valori homeworld. 200 warships formed a ring of steel around the planet that had ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries. Behind them came ships from a dozen other species, former slaves, and conquered peoples who had joined the human cause. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Constellation, and looked at the enemy world below. It was a gray planet, covered in massive cities and military installations. Somewhere down there, Emperor Vaelthur was watching his empire crumble. "All ships in position," reported Admiral Katie Price from the Liberty. "We have them completely surrounded. Their remaining fleet is badly outnumbered. They have nowhere to run." Cole nodded slowly. He felt no joy at this moment. Too many good people had died to reach this point. Danny Martinez, Frank Morrison, thousands of others whose names would be carved on memorials back on Earth. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. "Open a communication channel to the Imperial Palace," he ordered. "I think it is time we had a conversation with the Emperor." The face that appeared on the screen was ancient, even by Valori standards. Emperor Vaelthur had ruled his people for over 500 years. He had overseen the conquest of 17 star systems. He had ordered the deaths of billions of beings across dozens of worlds. And now he looked at Admiral Cole with something the Valori had never experienced before: fear. "Admiral Cole," the Emperor said. His voice was calm, but there was a tremor beneath the surface. "You have proven to be a worthy adversary, more worthy than I ever imagined." "I did not come here to receive compliments," Cole replied. "I came here to end this war. Your fleet is defeated. Your empire is collapsing. You have one chance to surrender unconditionally, and that chance is right now." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. His red eyes studied the human with a mixture of hatred and respect. "Before I make my decision, I must ask you something. I must understand. Why did you do this? When we first came to your world, we offered you a place in our empire. You could have lived as our subjects. It would not have been pleasant, but you would have survived. Instead, you chose war. You chose suffering. You chose death. Why?" Cole leaned forward slightly. His face was hard, his eyes like steel. "Because you made the same mistake every tyrant makes. You assumed that because we were peaceful, we were weak." He stood up from his chair and walked closer to the screen. "You sent your scouts to observe our world. They saw our art, our music, our philosophy. They saw us building cities and writing poetry. They saw us playing with our children and caring for our elderly. And you thought we were soft. You thought we were easy prey." The Emperor did not respond. He simply watched, waiting. "But you did not understand what you were seeing," Cole continued. "Those beautiful things, that peace and creativity and love, they exist because we chose to rise above our nature. We are not peaceful by instinct. We are violent, aggressive, territorial animals who learn to control ourselves. Our entire civilization is proof that we conquered our own darkness." He paused, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. "And when someone threatens our children, our homes, our future, we let that darkness out. You did not attack a peaceful species, Emperor. You poked a sleeping monster that had learned to dream of better things. And now that monster is awake." The Emperor's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, he truly understood what he was facing. "Congratulations," Cole said quietly. "You have just challenged the deadliest force in the galaxy." The throne room on the Valori homeworld was massive, built to intimidate visitors with the power and majesty of the Empire. But today it felt empty and hollow. Emperor Vaelthur sat on his ancient throne, surrounded by the last of his guards and advisors. The walls shook as human ships descended through the atmosphere. "What are your terms?" The Emperor asked through the communication channel. Cole's voice was firm. "Complete and unconditional surrender. All Valori military forces will stand down immediately. All conquered worlds will be freed. All enslaved species will be released. The Valori Empire as a political entity will cease to exist. And if I refuse, then we will do to your world what you plan to do to ours. We will burn your cities. We will destroy your infrastructure. We will make sure that the Valori never threaten anyone again." Cole paused. "But I would prefer not to do that. We are not like you. We do not enjoy destruction. We would rather build than burn, create than kill. Give us peace, and we will give you mercy." The emperor looked around his throne room at the faces of his officers and advisors. Some wanted to fight to the last. Others simply looked tired, ready for the long war to finally end. The empire had stood for 300 years, but empires did not last forever. Perhaps this was simply their time. "Very well," he said at last. "I accept your terms. The Valori Empire surrenders." The announcement went out across the galaxy. On every conquered world, former slaves looked up at the sky and wept with joy. Species that had lived in chains for generations walked free for the first time. The word spread from system to system, from planet to planet. The war was over. 1 week later, representatives from every free species gathered on Earth for the founding of the Galactic Alliance. Humans, Kethener, Velthians, and a dozen others sat together in a great assembly hall in New York City. They came as equals, united by their shared experience and their hope for the future. Admiral Cole gave the opening address. He looked out at the sea of faces, some human, some utterly alien, all looking at him with respect and gratitude. "We did not seek this war," he said. "We did not want to become warriors. But when war came to us, we had no choice but to fight. We fought not for conquest, not for resources, not for glory. We fought because we believe that all thinking beings deserve to be free. We fought because that is who we are." He looked at the former slaves in the audience, beings who had suffered for centuries under Valori rule. The Valori built their empire on fear. They believed that the strong had the right to dominate the weak, that power was the only thing that mattered. They were wrong. Power means nothing without purpose. Strength means nothing without compassion. The greatest force in the universe is not military might or advanced technology. It is the willingness to stand up for what is right, even when the odds are against you. Lisa Morrison was in the audience, still wearing the uniform she had worn during the liberation campaigns. She thought of her father, who had died in the final assault on the Valori homeworld. He had been one of thousands who had given their lives so that this moment could happen. She wiped a tear from her eye and stood a little straighter. Admiral Price sat in the front row, exhausted but proud. She had led the fleets that had broken the empire. She had freed worlds and inspired billions. And now she was watching something even more important than military victory. She was watching the birth of a new civilization. Cole continued. "Today we form the Galactic Alliance. Not an empire, but a partnership. Not a hierarchy, but a community. Every species here has an equal voice. Every world has equal rights. We will protect each other. We will trade with each other. We will learn from each other. And if anyone threatens any member of this alliance, they will face all of us together." He smiled, and it was a warm smile filled with hope. The Valori looked at the galaxy and saw only things to be conquered. We look at the galaxy and see friends we have not met yet. That is the difference between us. That is why we won. The assembly erupted in applause. Human hands clapped alongside alien appendages. Species that had never met before embraced like old friends. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in centuries, it was also bright. And across the stars, a new saying began to spread. It was whispered in trading posts and shouted in celebration halls. It was taught to children and remembered by elders. If you value your existence, never threaten Earth, because humans do not merely fight to survive, they fight to win, and then they help everyone. else do the same. The deadliest force in the galaxy had found a new purpose. They were no longer just warriors. They were protectors. And the galaxy would never be the same again.